Hi there, and thanks for joining my talk. It is a remarkable aspect of human society that we are able to coordinate and cooperate across a wide range of environments in the context of diverse individual interests and often with only limited information of each other. Accounts of shared activity generally focus on the psychological and normative characteristics of the interaction. Our cognitive attitudes may be organized alongside and along with those of our partners in ways that facilitate our acting together. And we may also rely on norms of both practical and moral reasoning to motivate us to behave in certain ways. How the normative characteristics of shared activities are related to the psychological attitudes of those involved is the subject of this talk. Specifically, I will discuss how existing accounts of shared intentional activity that assume common knowledge leave little room for norms to play a role. First, I will outline a general account of shared intentional activity and locate the condition of common knowledge. Then I'll discuss an observation made on reading this account, namely that the assumption of common knowledge leaves little room for norms to play. I'll discuss why I think this is an issue and explore what appears to be a paradox before raising a question that asks as to how to address this issue in existing accounts. Finally, I'll sketch the outlines of a model that could provide an answer to this question. We might think that how several individuals engage in a shared activity can partly be understood with reference to how they share intentions to do so. Analogous to the role performed by intention in the case of solo individual activity, in the joint case, shared intention provides the normative and psychological infrastructure necessary for supporting shared activity. For example, in Michael Bratman's view, shared intention is a complex of interlocking intentions of the individuals, which plays a basic role in helping coordinate the intentions and planning of all agents involved, allocating roles and responsibilities between them, and tracking the goal they have of their joint activity. Reductivist accounts of shared intention locate the intention to act jointly in individuals' own intentions. That is, I intend that we, Jay. On this view, shared intention is seen as a structure built up from certain cognitive attitudes each of us acting together have, namely attitudes directed towards the goal of our joint activity and those directed towards our partner's own cognitive attitudes. More specifically, with respect to a group consisting of you and me, and concerning joint activity J, Bratman's shared intention thesis is as follows. We intend to J if and only if 1A, I intend that we J, and B, you intend that we J. 2, I intend that we J in accordance with and because of 1A, 1B, and meshing subplans of 1A and 1B. You intend that we J in according with and because of 1A and 1B and meshing subplans of 1A and 1B. And 3, 1 and 2 are common knowledge between us. Like Bratman's influential account, most reductive accounts of shared intentional action involve a condition like 3, which I will focus on here. That is, it is necessary that each participant's intentions are common knowledge between them. Common knowledge ensures that individuals' relevant cognitive attitudes are public. It is an important assumption. It ensures that when we act together, we are each aware of our intentions to act jointly, we know what roles we must each play, what our parts are, and consequently what our partners expect of us. The assumption is core to enabling the structure of shared intention to provide a robust mechanism for helping us coordinate, plan, and undertake our joint activity. Existing accounts typically assume that common knowledge is simply in place. As Pettit and Schweikert note, it means that everything amongst us is above board. Bratman, in his early account, states that the fact that each of us has the relevant attitudes is itself out in the open, is public, and in his later work states that when we share an intention, each of us is responsive to the intentions and actions of the other in ways that track the intended end of the joint action, where all this is out in the open. I believe this assumption is taken for granted, and this is something that I want to explore here. To do so, we can start with the question of what exactly determines what we should do when we choose to interact with others. What norms of both practical rationality and of interpersonal obligation do we rely on in determining how to act? In Bratman's shared intention thesis, this is established upfront in condition 1. We all intend the joint activity. It is, in fact, core to his overarching account that for all of us involved in shared activity, quote, practical thinking on the part of each of us is shaped by that person's intention in favor of the joint activity. Further, via the common knowledge condition, I have full knowledge of your intentions, you of mine, and each of us that our intentions work and persist through each other. I thus incorporate your own intentions into my own planning, a kind of practical intersubjectivity in which I effectively treat your intentions and plans in much the same way that I treat my own. That is, as rational constraints on further intention and planning. There does not appear to be anything in Bratman's account that suggests that agents treat their own intentions differently to that of their partners. If we think of having common knowledge in the sense described here, then there isn't any more question of how likely it is that one's partner is going to act. Any question about whether they're going to do it, if there's common knowledge in the situation, in the way Bratman envisages it, then there's no room for any concern related to how likely it is that my joint action partner will act with me. Any question about whether they are going to do it, to act with me, is redundant. The question seems to have already been answered. It's already been settled. Shared intention has decided the matter. One consequence of this is that common knowledge means that there's no real special role for norms here in enabling us to rely on other people to make predictions about how others will act, because all of that is settled by the psychological states of those involved, the common knowledge. It's important that the structure of intentional knowledge does imply that certain norms will be enforced, but this appears as a consequence of common knowledge. It's not an essential part of what's providing support for the actions or rationalizing the actions and so on that we've been making. The above doesn't yet seem to be an issue. It just seems to be a description of a feature of these accounts. The main issue is instead that we might think that it's not good to have a model that assumes super cooperative attitudes, in which appeal to intentions, knowledge of intentions, common knowledge, all seem to require significant convergence and openness in the cooperative spirit of those involved. We may think that it's not good to have a model of shared agency in which the joint activity in question is, to put it crudely, the only thing that seems to matter in people's lives at the moment. There are no other tempting alternative options, no other projects, no other people to interact with, nothing else going on simultaneously. It's an idealized model that we might not think captures certain kinds of situations that we think might exist and which we might want to call shared agency. If we can be sure of what someone's intentions are, then we can act on those intentions. I think it's important to consider having a model that doesn't commit us to thinking only about situations where we have that certainty about another's intentions. So what we want to do is strip away that idealization and make sure we still have something relevant and explanatory. There appears to be a paradox, though. If we have common knowledge, so if there is actually a basis for each of us to have the knowledge that I know, that you know, that I know, etc., then it's hard to see how there can be both common knowledge and reasonable uncertainty about your intentions. If that I intend to fly to London is common knowledge, then it can't be the case about whether you're uncertain about my intentions to fly to London. To resolve this paradox, we must ask then how it is that we could construct a model that doesn't rely on this assumption that we have common knowledge of another's intentions, and indeed that allows the possibility, as is often the case, that we could be quite sure about another's intentions. Put differently, how is it rational or reasonable for me to do something, for example, to act jointly, where I'll only see the benefits in which I do something, but rely on someone else's contributions about which I'm uncertain? I began this talk by saying that norms don't seem to be playing a role on most accounts of shared activity. They're often an afterthought, really. Apologies. Online discussions. One possible answer to the question, so I began this talk by saying that norms don't seem to be playing a specific role in most accounts of shared intentional activity. They're often added as an afterthought or expressed afterwards or discussed afterwards. One possible answer then to the question I raised is perhaps to appeal to norms to help out here. Specifically, we can try to understand if, how, and when norms can make it rational for me to rely on your intentions, even when there may be a lot of uncertainty about them. That is, on an account that falls far short of common knowledge. For example, I'm coming towards you carrying a big box and you are manifestly in the way. Let's say we've made eye contact. It's very reasonable to think you will step aside, not just because of the regularity of these kind of occurrences, but because we are in a social situation and there's common knowledge of norms about what happens next. Example 2. While I'm walking down a street, a tree branch falls on top of a car parked in the road. I notice that there's a small dog trapped in the car, and also that there are other people about, though I do not pay attention to anyone in particular. I rush around the one side of the car, knowing that I can't lift the branch off myself, but fully expecting another to rush to the other side of the car to grasp the other end and lift off. What these two examples aim to demonstrate is that in having less or imperfect information on a possible partner's behavior or attitudes, or no assumption of purely cooperative behavior built in, we can still rely on norms to provide the assurance about another's intentions that we might have. Crucially, if we imagine situations in which people have mixed cooperative motives, this situation of having norms can be good for reducing uncertainty about what my intentions are and whether my intentions will actually lead to action. In this way, what is required is agents' common knowledge of those norms involved in shared activity that allows agents to infer that their partners will come to intend in a specific way, rather than common knowledge of the intentions themselves. Norms can thus, on this view, provide the basis for establishing shared intention. There's a further question, in that in the sense described here, norms allow us to rely on others, even in the case of uncertainty about their intentions. This raises the question, though, how can norms enter the psychology of individuals and provide the normative force to make it rational for them to act together? Well, one familiar answer is that norms introduce costs for things that would otherwise appear uncooperative. For example, defection in collective action situations, or which favor undesirable outcomes, like those in which conventions are violated. So it's not that agents are especially cooperative, it's just that these costs are outweighing. Norms thus provide a motivational and instrumental role in guiding agents towards having the right kinds of intentions, and they therefore allow other agents to rely on these intentions in the first place. I might very well bend to lift one side of a table in the belief that once you turn around, catch my eye and see my position, you will walk over and lift up the other side of the table. To conclude, or rather to summarize, I began with an account of shared intention and identifying a feature of the account in which the assumption of common knowledge appeared to eliminate uncertainty about one's partner's intentions. There's no real question of how likely it is that one's partner will act. The question then is how to structure a model such that we can have uncertainty about another's intentions, but still ensure that it's rational to rely on certain premises about what those intentions are. I sketched a possible alternative where other accounts appeal to intentions and knowledge of intentions, which seems to require a large degree of openness and cooperativeness. There's a possibly alternative picture that uses a similar structure in which norms, or common knowledge of norms, does much of the work that enables us to rationally do things and depend on others. And having common knowledge of certain norms, the kinds of evidence that you need might be fairly limited for you to know that, given that I've led you to think I'm going to do something now, I'm going to do it, or otherwise provide some form of compensation. If you go ahead and act on this, and I can see you doing that, etc. A possible challenge in relying on common knowledge of norms to fill the place taken by common knowledge of intentions is that norms are thought to be quite general, and so not able to provide the kinds of detailed evidence required in specific circumstances. Nonetheless, I'm looking forward to exploring these ideas further, and thank you for listening to my presentation.